What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Hawk Talk on Melrose YouTube page, where we are going to talk some Hawks. But before we do that, make sure you subscribe, like the video, and share with your friends. That is all we ask, and let's roll. All right, here we go. Hawk Talk on Melrose. Iowa, Ohio State this weekend. A big game for Iowa. The last time we were on previewing the Minnesota game, that game was 100% a must-win game. You cannot afford to go into Columbus 0-1 in the Big Ten, because more than likely it's going to be a loss and all that stuff. But this game is a big test for Iowa. Can we hold our own, Tyler, in this game? Can we show the world that we can, be competitive in these bigger games? Because ever since that game in 2021, it was actually around this time of the year, 3 years ago against Penn State, we have not been competitive at all. 6 games that we have played against ranked teams, all 6 were losses. But not only that, just completely embarrassed. Average margin of victory, 31 points. We only put up 27 points in those 6 games. Meanwhile, we gave up 215 points, which for some people might be like, oh, well, your defense must not be that good then. But it's more the offense, if anything, in those games. Yeah. So can we just come out and show the sign that, hey, we can be a little bit competitive? Because it has not been acceptable for where we need to be at as a program. And we want to be kind of in the upper half of the Big Ten. You got to be able to be in these games. I'm not saying you have to win them all, because you're not going to, but be competitive in these games.
Yeah, and just be able to have a pulse on offense. I mean, that, like you laid out, we just, what was it last year? What were the stats against our ranked opponents? We scored 0 points, right?
92-0.
92-0. There you go. That's where we're not expecting maybe to win all those games, but like you said, to be competitive and to score points. Like, that's what it comes down to. Like, you were so bad on offense the last how many years. We feel a lot better about this offense. I still really feel like the passing game is not where we want it to be yet, which doesn't bode well against a team like Ohio State, who is really talented on defense and is, like most teams, going to try to stop the run, but teams have tried and have failed so far. So maybe that's the case this weekend. We'll see. But you got to be able to score. You got to be able to score points, and to give your defense a break in these games where they play really well. It just doesn't show it because they're on the field 75-80% of the time.
Yeah, and we'll get more into the actual game here soon. I saw just before David Eichel, he had a tweet, and it kind of goes to show, and I've said this a lot on this podcast, that back in the day, we used to be competitive in these type of games. He had a tweet that says, as an unranked team, Iowa has more top 5 wins than any team in the country over the past 20 seasons. Obviously, the last 3 seasons, that has not been the case, been god awful. So it's not like we've never been able to do this. We used to be competitive. I mean, you go back to the Ohio State game 2009 in Columbus, maybe should have won that game. 2013, we only lost 34-24 at Ohio State. Yeah. So can we just go in, not saying we have to win, nor do I think we're going to win, because I do not at all. But just go in and make it a third, fourth quarter game. I want to bring up also the last time we played in Columbus, which was 2022. I did a little bit more research in that game because I just kind of want to see how that game kind of panned out. We obviously lost 54-10, but it was very interesting to kind of see Ohio State finished with only 360 total yards, and they were 3 for 13 on third down, yet we lost 54-10. How did we do that? Because we were 1 for 13 on third downs. You were mentioning the offense just before. Got to be better on offense. 1 for 13. That's like 3 and out after 3 and out after 3 and out. 158 total yards, and we had 6 turnovers that game. So that's how we lost 54-10. So if you just look at the number, you think like we just got blown out. Defense sucks. Offense sucks, which that is true, but the defense did not suck. Their points, so they had 26 points in the first half. They had 1 touchdown that I will give it to them. They had 75-yard drive. But their other points came from a touchdown that was an interception, so a pick 6, And then they had 4 field goals, but all 4 field goals, they started in Iowa's territory. Iowa 29-yard line, Iowa 27, Iowa 34, and Iowa 32. So they were already in field goal range when they started the drive. Those were their points in the first half. In the second half, they had 2 drives that I will give them. They drove down the field, but then their other 2 drives, they started in Iowa's territory because we fumbled the ball and we intercepted the ball. And one last nugget about that game. We started the game off. It was a bye week. Remember that. And we're going to talk more about the adjustments after a bye week, and hopefully it's better with Tim Lester. First play of the game was interception. And then the second half, the first play of the game was a fumble, or the first drive. And then the second drive was an interception. I mean, yeah, you're not going to win when you do that. That Ohio State team, by the way, I'm going to say
Who's
this
the quarterback of that game?
Well, I was just going to say, so that team, this team currently is more talented. I will give them that. But quarterback, they had CJ Stroud versus now Will Howard. I would rather take playing Will Howard than CJ Stroud. And it wasn't like they still had Travion Henderson. They had Abuka. They had Jackson Smith and Jimbo, which I don't think he played a whole lot that game. I think he was still hurt. They had Marvin Harrison Jr. But talent-wise, from top to bottom, they're more talented this year. But quarterback play, I'd rather go up against Will Howard than CJ Stroud.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. And yeah, the big thing is, I remember we turned it over so many times in that game. When you look at this game, and it doesn't matter who the quarterback is, Cade, whoever, you can't turn the ball over. You got to play a damn near perfect game in terms of not turning the ball over and hope the ball on defense bounces your way a few times and win that turnover battle. That's a good start to give yourself a chance to be in this type of game. That'll be a big key. And then I guess, obviously, there has to be a semblance of a passing game with Cade McNamara in this game. If you expect to line up and run it 40 times against Ohio State, I just don't think that is going to. I think we could bust off a big one here or there. We've shown that. We've proven that. But this is an elite defense. This isn't even Minnesota. Right? This is the cream of the crop on defense. They got a lot of guys. They got a lot of guys returning, a lot of experience, a lot of key transfers in the secondary. Kaleb Downs from Alabama, they're elite. They're a top 3 team for a reason. And so I just, if we want to be respectable, like we're talking about, we want to be in this game, we want to be competitive, Cade has to be able to deliver through the air at some point.
Yeah, I actually wrote that down. Quarterback play from Cade McNamara, which you could say that for any game, but specifically this game. And I bookmarked another tweet. Rick Webster had this tweet out. Cade McNamara's stats at Iowa, so I'm not including Michigan here, at Iowa versus Power 4 defenses. Iowa State, 123 total yards, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception. Penn State last year, 42 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Iowa State, so I think that Iowa State game was last year. And then Iowa State game this year, 99 yards, 2 interceptions. Minnesota, 62 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Wow. So he's at no touchdowns. Wow. He's at 3 interceptions, 48% completion percentage. And Iowa in those 4 games against Power 4 defenses that Cade McNamara's played in, because keep in mind he got hurt, so he's only played against 4 Power 4 defenses at Iowa. We're 2-2, and we only average 17 points per game. So that has to change this weekend. If he has stats similar to those 4 games, it's game over. And
this is the problem. He hasn't done it yet, and now you're going up against Ohio State.
Yeah.
Which doesn't give me a ton of confidence, but we did have a bye week.
Yep.
And the big thing is, he's got something to prove, clearly. I mean, I didn't even know it was that bad, to be honest with you. That's actually shocking. He's got something to prove this weekend. Again, not saying that we got to win, but we want to show that we belong on the same field, right?
Yep. So this game for me, as we look here, because as Iowa fans, we try to find ways and loopholes of okay, maybe, trying to be optimistic about it, even though we know that it's more than likely going to go a certain way, which is obviously a loss. But the one thing going for Iowa, and Kirk Ferentz talked about this yesterday, was injury wise. It sounds like we are the healthiest that Kirk has ever seen this far into the season. We get back Seth Anderson, LaShawn Williams is already back. So injury wise, that's great. Bye week, I hope, and this is where it's I wish I could say this to be true, because we haven't seen it yet now with Tim Lester, because we haven't went through a bye week with him. But can we actually utilize this bye week? Because we had no confidence that Brian Ferentz could do it, and he didn't because we saw the results after every bye week.
Right.
It was the same old, same old, same old,
If not
and
worse.
if not worse. And so far, though, what makes me a little confident is because we've already seen adjustments week by week from Tim Lester. You talk like the Sullivan adjustment, right?
Yeah.
That does not happen with Brian Ferentz. I can literally promise you that. Like we would not see Sullivan out there in those packages if Brian Ferentz was still the offensive coordinator. So that's what makes me think, okay, maybe Tim Lester is smart enough to actually utilize the bye week and find some wrinkles, see some things that we could maybe do differently, and to attack this Ohio State defense. Another thing, too, is the situation where this game is at. You talk about Ohio State, who had to go on the road last week. Granted, Michigan State's not that good, but you had to go on the road, night game. And then next week is their biggest game of the year at Oregon. 100% biggest game of the year. And so we're kind of sandwiched right in there, which I think bodes well for Iowa. So I just wanted to bring that up. That doesn't make me think that, you know, we're going to win now. But that gives maybe a little bit better of a hope that, hey, maybe we can make this a game.
Yeah. Yeah. You brought up the bye week, and the hope with Tim Lester, like you said, is, you know, did they find something on film with Ohio State that they can use to their advantage, right? Whether, you know, specifically offensively, whether it's in the run game or pass game. And then obviously another week to work on the timing, the passing game with Cade and these receivers and tight ends, like to get more on the same page, because that's going to be something that has to get better because it's just been so inconsistent, right? And you mentioned it. It's been really good against non-power 4 opponents. It's been really bad against power 4 opponents. And so you hope that another week, you hope after listening to, you know, that press conference, 2 weeks ago with Tim specifically, you know, me and you have been on here clamoring for Caleb Brown to get more catches and more looks his way. And I'm hoping that's something that we could look forward to.
Hey, this is like a homecoming for him because he was at Ohio State.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. So maybe he'll be ready to go for this game. A little something to, you know, chip on his shoulder, something to prove. And then obviously Kaleb Johnson, you know, being from Ohio as well and wanting to show out and be on the same field as those talented running backs that they got. So, yeah, I really hope we utilize this bye week. Like you said, number one, get healthy, which it sounds like we did and have gotten there as healthy as we can be. And then 2, you know, the results on the field. Hopefully it shows.
I wanted to bring up, and you just talked about Kaleb Johnson a little bit more, and Luke Lachey, because those are 2 guys from Ohio. Luke Lachey's dad's actually a radio announcer for Ohio State Buckeyes, which is weird. So he's going to be calling the game. So those two guys are keys for Iowa. Those are your 2 best offensive weapons. Now we have seen Kaleb Johnson, what he has done. And the question remains for me, because I was dead wrong. I thought Minnesota, I figured he would have a good game, but I think I even said, like, you know, probably half of what we have seen from him in terms of total yards. And I was dead wrong. He finished with 206. So it's going to be very interesting to see how many yards he ends up finishing. This is a huge moment for Kaleb Johnson. He's not going to win the Heisman, right? But if you have a huge game like on CBS against Ohio State, you start hearing the outside noise a little bit more. I think a lot of people haven't really paid attention to Kaleb Johnson and what he's been doing. So this is a huge moment. And for him, like I said, going back to Ohio, it's where he is from. He didn't get recruited by Ohio State. He did mention yesterday that even if he did, he wouldn't have gone there. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but that's what he said anyway. And then Luke Lachey, like I said, he's from that area. His dad is employed at Ohio State. And with Luke Lachey, we have yet to see what we maybe thought he was going to do before the season. I think he's averaging like 20 some yards a game. And I really thought like it would be upwards of 50 to 60 last year in the games that he played. He was like averaging like over 60 yards per game. So this could be a huge moment for Luke Lachey, and then obviously for Kaleb Johnson. How many yards do you think Kaleb Johnson realistically is going to get on Saturday?
It's tough because I do think I can't see him getting 175 to 200 yards. I just can't see it. No. I think Ohio State's defensive line and their whole game plan is going to be centered around him. But I do think we're going to be handing it off to him enough where, depending on how the game goes too, you know, Iowa, I'm sure, wants to shorten the game, run the ball, try to be effective, time of possession, limit their offense on the field. I
Yeah.
could see him getting 35 carries, right? I would say
Well, he's gonna be fresh
my
with the bye
max
week.
is going to be about 100-ish yards. I
Yeah.
could see him getting to realistically.
That's literally kind of what I was like thinking, like maybe 90 to
Yeah.
100. We just, another thing too, I know this is something that's like obvious, but we need to make it where we play good in all four quarters because we have yet to see that this year. One game was 75% Minnesota game. You could argue it was the second half and then also the first quarter. But then the other games, it was 50-50. Like one half was
Yeah.
good, one half was bad. You can't do that against Ohio State. You got to come out firing in all cylinders and you have to play good all four quarters. You cannot go one good or one bad quarter, one good quarter, one bad quarter. You just can't let that happen. Yeah. And then, like you said just earlier, got to stay on the field. Time of possession is huge in these type of games. Going back to 2022, 1 for 13 on third down. Like that is number one, embarrassing. It's inexcusable. You as a Power 4 program, 1 for 13. Are you kidding me? Like, what are we doing? You cannot let that happen. And so far, we've been pretty good on third downs. I know the Minnesota game, we finished like 7 for 15, which is about 50%. That's what you want. And so that's another really big key.
Exactly. Yep. Specifically for the offense. I 100% agree. You have to move the chains. You can't just go 3 and out consistently and expect the defense to roll out there and to hold these guys. I mean, I'm going back just to Ohio State's last week, Michigan State. Michigan State was 3-0 Ohio State in the first quarter. In the fourth quarter, nobody scored. So in 2 quarters, you only gave up 3 points against Ohio State. But you look at the second and third quarter, you give up 35. I mean, they can do that in a hurry, right, with their offense. Chip Kelly calling plays now. Obviously, Ryan Day relinquishing that over to him. Great hire, underrated hire, I think. Obviously, we talk about Ohio State's running backs, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, all the receivers they've got. Jeremiah Smith looks like the next best wide receiver to come out of Ohio State. Abuka. I mean, they're loaded. They can score in a hurry. So you're exactly right. We have to find a way to stay on the field and to limit that time of or limit their time of possession on the field and hope a guy like Will Howard, who I am kind of like, I don't think he's a top quarterback in the country. I really don't, but he doesn't have to do much when you got all that talent around. So
he's
if
in
you
a
can
great
force him into
system
and if you can force him into some mistakes, that's how you get this game to the third and fourth quarter, then you got a chance.
I'm glad you brought up Ohio State's offense because I was going to transition to that, talking more about the defense now because it's going to be a huge test, especially on the outside. I'm okay with Jamar Harris. I feel confident in him, but the other side, it's like I just don't know, right? Deshaun Lee, TJ Hall. It's going to be probably those two. John Nestor's kind of out of the picture at this point, but who knows? Maybe we'll see a surprise and he's out there. But that's what scares me because you just mentioned their wide receivers are really good. I'm not saying Iowa State's offense or their out playmakers are as explosive or as good, but that was at least a good test for Iowa. These guys are better, but that was at least a good test. And it kind of showed like what we needed to do as we prepare now for Ohio State. Something that's not also talked about. I think we focused a lot on the outside, and maybe it's because our rushing defense is so good, but I'm a little nervous about the running backs too. You just mentioned it. Travion Henderson, Judkins, and that's the thing. Like if they get their run game going, like that just opens up everything for them. It makes everything so easy. And that's what scares me as well. We've really got to make sure we shut down their run game. And so far this year, we have been able to do that against the first 4 teams, but this is a little bit different of a beast. When you talk like offensive line too, Ohio State's offensive line is pretty good. I know going into the year, that was one of their maybe like weaknesses, but so far it hasn't looked bad. So yeah, it's going to be a huge challenge for Iowa, a huge challenge for the corners. But going back to just kind of like the offense, like if the offense can just sustain drives where the defense isn't out there all the time, you can make adjustments on the sideline. You can take a breather a little bit, right? Force Ohio State's offense to be off the field. That is a win.
And my question to you is, we've seen it, Minnesota, not maybe a deep pass, but I wouldn't consider like a long touchdown like we had seen against Troy, Iowa State. what is your level of confidence with the secondary in terms of giving up
Yeah.
explosive plays?
Oh, you know what's going to happen.
It's going to happen once for sure.
We're going to give up a few big plays. Like, you don't just go the first 4 weeks against Minnesota, Troy, Iowa State, and we've seen it, and it's like, okay, now we're playing even better team. It's going to happen. As much as we don't want to say it's not going to happen, is the question really is how much is it going to happen? Because if you tell me right now that it only happens a few times, then okay, that's a win for Iowa, I think.
Get pressure with 4. That's going to be huge in this game, and you can drop everybody else into coverage trying to defend all this talent on the outside, and also the running backs that can catch it, I'm sure, out of the backfield. So that's going to be key. Who's that going to be on the D line to step up and try to win? Guys like Brian Allen, Max Llewellyn, these guys have registered some sacks in these last couple games. Like, I think they could have Herkett. Obviously Deontay Craig. They're going to have to be big. D line's going to have to be big. Not only stopping the run, but trying to create some pressure.
Yep. Yeah, because the Minnesota game we saw at times it was not very good.
You saw what happened when you didn't get pressure. You went 10 for 10.
Yep. And then we started kind of generating some pressure via sending a linebacker, and it helped. But against Ohio State's explosive offense, you want to, like you said, like, bring all those guys out in coverage. You don't really want to have to use 1 or 2 linebackers to have to come in. Like, it'd be huge if just our 4 defensive linemen can create pressure. Well, no doubt about it.
Real quick, and then obviously, I think what we talked about it with Minnesota, this is obviously true against Ohio State. You can't give them everything, right? You're going to have to give up something. You can't let them run the ball and throw it. I think you got to stop the run first of all. But the problem is, if we can't stop the run, then that means we're going to be dropping some safeties to try to help in the run support, and then that's when they go deep. Yep. So I think you've got to try to stop the run first.
Yep. And going back to when you asked me about the explosive plays, the key for me too, and I didn't mention this when I said, like, it's not a question of like if it's going to happen, it's how much. Will those explosive plays result in, like, it's a touchdown explosive play, or is it like a 40-yard explosive play, but they don't score? Because that's
like the Minnesota game where
that's another big thing. Yes, where it's like bend but don't break. Correct. Because if we're forcing them to where they're getting explosive plays, but they're ending up with field goals, that's huge. Going back to the 2022 Ohio State game, the first half, 4 field goals. I mean, like, all 4 of those drives, they could have easily scored. They started in Iowa's territory, and we forced them to field goals, and that's huge in this type of game. And so that's another thing as well. Bend but don't break. Even if they do, sustain drives, they go down the field, they have a 50-yard explosive play or a 40-yard explosive play. Okay, but do they score a touchdown? And that's key. If they don't force them to field goals, that's big time. And also, once again, special teams is not talked about, but that is a huge factor in this game. Can Drew Stevens, if we do get into field goal range, can he kick his field goals? Now, I don't think field goals really matter because Ohio State's going to score touchdowns, but they do in a way, right? And then also, like, the punt, because you go back to the Michigan game last year, we gave up that like 90-yard punt return that set Michigan up at like the 3-yard line. You cannot let that happen. And so Reese Dakin had an unbelievable game against Minnesota. Can he continue that? Because that's huge in this type of game. So all those things play a factor. I mean, once again, this is one of those games where you just have to be good in all 3 phases. You cannot be bad in one of the phases. Against Northwesterns, against the Troys of the world, you can be bad in one of those phases, and you'll probably maybe still win. Not in this game. You got to be good in special teams, got to be good in defense, you got to be good at offense. All 3 phases, complementary football. We talk about it all the time, or Kirk Ferentz talks about it all the time. And unfortunately, the last 6 ranked opponents that we have played, we did not play complementary football because we didn't score touchdowns. We turned the ball over, and it was just really bad on offense. Here's a question for you. What does Iowa need to do or show you on Saturday that, I'm not saying it has to be a win, but just needs to do or show you where you feel good for the rest of the year? Like, okay, like, I feel, because like the Penn State game last year, after that game, I remember being down in Arizona and we were all sitting there and we're like, oh my God, this is going to be a freaking long year. Yeah. Blah, 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 blah. What does Iowa need to do to show you that, hey, like, I have confidence, like, this year can turn out to be pretty good?
Number one, because it's such a hostile environment, win the turnover battle in the shoe. I think that is, if you can win the turnover battle, I think that bodes well down the road. Whether you win or lose this game, if you win the turnover battle, I feel really good, because that means our offense didn't probably turn it over very much, and we actually did force some turnovers on defense. That's number one. Number two, I have to see Cade McNamara get a passing touchdown in this game. I have to see it. That might actually be number one now that I think about it. I have to see it with my own two eyes, him throwing a touchdown to a wide receiver against Ohio State. Because it's this PTSD. And now you mentioned it with him specifically, even against Power 4 teams. Like he hasn't done well. I have to see a passing touchdown. And then, honestly, if I can see that we don't give up more than maybe one explosive play, or, we give up some explosive plays, but like you just said, they don't actually result in touchdowns, I'll feel really good, because that is a concern for the defense. I never thought I'd actually have that as a concern, but if we can limit the explosive plays for Ohio State, I'll have really good confidence going down, against any other team that we play.
That and if like, let's just say Kaleb Johnson has another huge game, then I'm feeling like, okay, if he can do that against Ohio State, or go back to the Minnesota game, Minnesota's a physical team, like did it against Minnesota. Man, I feel like he's going to do it the rest of the year against every other team that we face. But yeah, for me, it's just like being competitive. I mean, I know that's the easy answer out, but just, can you go in there and where we flip the channel after the game and we're like, okay, that wasn't as bad as I thought.
Though? A cover, or what does that mean?
Yeah,
I guess.
Yes, like a cover. So right now it's, I think, 20 points. I think it's the point spread
for 20.
Yeah, I think it's about 20 or something like that. To me, it doesn't really matter what the score is. To me, it's okay. Can you go into number one halftime, similar to like, okay, Wisconsin this week? And I know they ended up losing by more than like a touchdown, but they went into half at USC 21-10. They were up 21-10 at half. Okay. Once again, this is a CBS game. It's national televised. There's going to be a lot of eyeballs on it. Not saying we have to be up at half, but can you go into halftime where it is a competitive game, where you're actually like, you go into half and you're like, man, we have a chance here. And then after the third quarter, like, are you going in the fourth quarter where it's a long shot, but you're still in it? Technically, you're still in it. Yeah. So that's like me, like just being competitive. Going back to the Penn State game last year, the first quarter we kind of were, but we shot ourselves in the foot, right? We had those stupid turnovers. And even though we were only down 10-0 at half, we knew the ball game was over because our offense was that bad. Can't let that happen. You got to have some sort of life on offense to win that game. And, for me, after this game, I want to
just enjoy this game too.
Yeah, I want to enjoy this game, especially because it's on CBS. It's like, I just want to enjoy this game. But like for me too, after this game, you look at the rest of the season. As of right now, we have no more ranked opponents on the schedule. So you get past this game, and if you feel good after this game, you're feeling really good about the rest of the way. Washington, I think, Michigan State, Northwestern, Wisconsin, and then you have UCLA, and then you have another bye week. But those 5 games are all winnable. Not saying we're going to win all of them, and hopefully we do. Hopefully we go 5-0 against those 5 teams. But if you walk out of Ohio State feeling pretty good, then you're feeling good about those 5 games. And then obviously you have another bye week in there, and then you play Maryland, Nebraska. So it can still set up for a really good year. And I know we didn't really want to talk about it after the Iowa State game, and I still think it's a long shot to make the playoffs. But once again, if you're sitting at 10-2 at the end of the year, you put up a fight against Ohio State, we're at least in the mention. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen, but we're at least in the mention of that, right? So that's what I want. And for me too, it's moving forward, man. I mean, this is a new Big Ten. You're going to be playing 2 to 3 really good teams every year. At some point, we got, like I said, if we want to be in the top half of the Big Ten and be a respectable program and show like, hey, we're an upper tier program, not like upper tier. We're with like the Penn States and the Ohio States of the world, but just right under that. You got to be able to compete in these games. Not saying you have to win them all. You want to win it ever so often, but you got to at least compete in most of them. So that's for me.
Yeah. Prediction time though. Okay. So I've gone back and forth. I have gone back and forth on this, and I just, until I see how we utilize the bye week, what did we do to specifically attack Ohio State offensively and defensively? Did we play a clean game? Until I see it, I can't have Iowa cover just yet. I've got us losing 34-13. So I have a touchdown and 2 field goals. We get on the board a little bit. I really feel like we're going to get into this, like, try to just ground and pound our way to a victory, and we're going to get those 3 and outs that we were not wanting to see, and we're going to give that offense, that high-powered offense, the ball right back, and, they're going to either take a shot or bust off a long run, whatever the case may be, and it's going to feel similar to what we've seen in the past, but I hope, and this is me hoping, we can actually score a freaking touchdown, whether it's Kaleb Johnson or McNamara throwing it to somebody. But yeah, that's just where I'm at right now. Until I really see us be competitive in this game on the road, I've seen what happens in Kinnick, right? We slayed some giants in Kinnick, but on the road, ranked matchup, I gotta see it first before I can really be confident in saying that, we only lost by 10 points.
Yeah. I had 37-16 was what I had for a final score. I figured, get a touchdown in there and then a couple field goals. So at that point, it's like, okay, is that a respectable score? Once again, it all depends on, okay, what's the score after the third quarter? Is it 28-13, right? And then we give up some stuff in the fourth quarter. The thing for me, it's like, I'm not really like that. Score confidence is really low for me. The thing that I am confident in, and I hate saying this, I just feel like in the second half, we're going to give up some like maybe quick touchdowns. Like, and I don't know. I just feel like that's going to happen. Like, we're going to get to the fourth quarter. We're going to be kind of tired. We're just going to be a little outmatched at that point, just talent wise and things like that, where, they might have 2 drives in there where they score like quickly. And it's like, okay, next thing we know, it's like, man, it was a close one. Now it's like all of a sudden, like, oh my gosh, we're down by a lot now. So that's what I feel like. I hope I'm dead wrong on that, but I just have that weird feeling that could happen.
You never know if Iowa plays their best day and Ohio State's off, because it is a sandwich game kind of for them, maybe looking ahead a little bit, you never know. So that's why that's why you play the game, right?
That's why you play the game. You always have a chance. Analytics, They have 89% Ohio State winning. So, hey, that 10% chance is always a chance. Well, that will do it for this episode. Thank you guys all for listening. We will be back on Sunday going over this game. Until then, have a good rest of your week and go Hawks.